My name is Jessica Morgan, I'm 26 years old, and I'm standing in my childhood kitchen holding my wedding venue contracts while my father just announced he gave my entire $40,000 wedding fund to my younger sister Emma for her emergency medical expenses. My fiancé Derek stands beside me, witnessing this betrayal unfold. Just as Dad finishes explaining how Emma deserves it more, she walks through the front door wearing a brand new designer outfit, laughing about how her medical crisis is completely over. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever dealt with family favoritism or wedding drama, hit that like button and subscribe because this story has more twists than you can imagine. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While Emma got to focus on having fun and being the baby of the family, I worked 3 jobs through college just to keep my head above water. Every single penny I earned went toward my education or got saved in a jar on my dresser. My parents, Bob and Linda Morgan, promised me when I graduated with my business degree that they'd contribute $40,000 toward my wedding as a graduation gift. They said it was their way of recognizing all my hard work and dedication. Derek Williams came into my life during my senior year of college. He's a hardworking mechanic who saved every dollar he could to buy me the most beautiful engagement ring I'd ever seen. Coming from a humble family where his parents, Tom and Carol, taught him the value of honest work, Derek understood what it meant to earn everything you had. When he proposed last Christmas, I cried not just because I loved him, but because I finally felt like someone truly valued me. Emma, on the other hand, is 23 and has never held a real job in her entire life. She's always been Dad's little princess and Mom's precious baby who could do no wrong. Whatever Emma wanted, Emma got. New car for her 16th birthday while I rode the bus? Emma deserved it because she was going through a tough time in high school. Designer clothes for college while I shopped at thrift stores? Emma needed to fit in with her peers. The pattern never changed, but I always told myself it would be different when it came to something as important as my wedding. Standing in that kitchen, watching Emma parade around in clothes that cost more than most people make in a month, I realized how naive I'd been. Derek's jaw clenched as he listened to my father explain how Emma had come to them in tears, claiming she needed emergency surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. The medical bills were supposedly overwhelming, and as the caring parents they are, Bob and Linda couldn't bear to see their youngest daughter suffer. But Dad, I managed to say, my voice shaking with disbelief, we already put deposits down on everything. The venue, the caterer, the photographer. Derek and I have been planning this for 8 months. Bob shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my eyes. Jessica, you need to understand that Emma's health comes first. You can have a simple ceremony. Marriage isn't about the party anyway. That's when Emma decided to chime in, still grinning from whatever shopping spree she'd just returned from. Oh, Jessica, you're being so dramatic. I had the most amazing time in Paris. Tyler and I stayed at this incredible hotel right by the Eiffel Tower. You should have seen the shopping there. Derek's hand found mine, squeezing tight as the words sank in. Paris. Hotel. Shopping. Not exactly the medical emergency that supposedly required my wedding fund. Emma, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level, I thought you needed surgery? She waved her hand dismissively, setting down shopping bags from luxury stores I couldn't even pronounce. Oh, that? The doctor said it was just stress. A little vacation was exactly what I needed to feel better. Thanks for understanding, sis. Linda, who had been suspiciously quiet during this entire exchange, finally spoke up. Jessica, honey, you have to stop being so selfish. Emma has been through so much lately with her anxiety and everything. Sometimes people need different kinds of healing. I stared at my mother, the woman who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who was now defending the theft of my wedding fund for a European vacation. Derek stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. Mrs. Morgan, with all due respect, Jessica worked incredibly hard for that money. She's been planning this wedding since we got engaged, and you both promised to help her. This doesn't seem fair. Bob's face reddened. Son, I appreciate that you care about Jessica, but this is a family matter. Emma needed that money more than Jessica needs some fancy party. A fancy party? Derek's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. Sir, this is your daughter's wedding. This is supposed to be one of the most important days of her life. Emma rolled her eyes dramatically. God, Derek, you're being just as dramatic as Jessica. It's not like you can't still get married. Just do it at City Hall or something. Why do you need all the bells and whistles anyway? I felt something break inside me at that moment. Not just my heart, but my faith in the people who were supposed to love and protect me. Derek must have sensed it because he pulled me closer, his arm around my waist like a shield against my own family's cruelty. Come on, Jessica, he said quietly. Let's go home. We need to figure out what we're going to do about the deposits we've already paid. As we headed toward the door, Emma called out sweetly, Oh, and Jessica? I hope you don't mind, but Tyler and I are thinking about getting engaged soon. Maybe you could give me some wedding planning tips. The sound of her laughter followed us all the way to Derek's truck. Over the next few days, Derek and I tried to salvage what we could of our wedding plans. Most vendors required deposits that were non-refundable, money we'd scraped together from our own savings. As we sat in our small apartment going through contracts and trying to figure out how to afford even a simple ceremony, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Riley. Did you know Emma's boyfriend Tyler is Harrison Blackwell's son? As in Blackwell Industries? Girl, his family owns half the businesses in this town. My hand shook as I showed Derek the message. Tyler wasn't just some college kid Emma was dating. He was from one of the wealthiest families in our area, which meant Emma's financial emergency was even more ridiculous than we'd initially thought. Before I could fully process this information, Mom called. Her voice was unusually cheerful as she delivered the second blow. Jessica, sweetheart, I have some exciting news. Your father and I have decided to throw Emma an engagement party at the Riverside Country Club. Isn't that wonderful? She and Tyler made it official yesterday. The Riverside Country Club. The same venue Derek and I had booked for our wedding reception. The same place where I'd dreamed of dancing with my new husband, surrounded by family and friends who loved us. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, that's where Derek and I were supposed to have our reception. Oh, honey, that was before everything changed. Emma needs this celebration. You know how sensitive she is, and Tyler's family expects a certain level of sophistication. The country club is perfect for that kind of event. Derek was pacing our small living room, running his hands through his hair. I could see the anger building in his shoulders, the way his jaw set when he was trying to control his temper. What about our deposit, Mom? We put down $1,500 to hold that date. Well, Emma can use that. Think of it as your engagement gift to her. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Derek immediately pulled me into his arms as I started to cry. These weren't just tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage, a betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. The next morning brought another devastating blow. Emma showed up at our apartment unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key I'd stupidly given her months ago. Jessica. I have the most amazing news, she squealed, holding up a garment bag. Mom said I can wear Grandma Rose's wedding dress for my engagement party. You know, the one with all the vintage lace and beadwork? It's going to look absolutely perfect on me. Grandma Rose's dress. The dress I'd been promised since I was 12 years old. The dress that had been in our family for 3 generations, passed down from mother to daughter. The dress I'd been planning to wear on the most important day of my life. Derek stepped between Emma and me before I could respond. Emma, that dress was promised to Jessica. She shrugged, hanging the garment bag on our door. Well, Mom says I should have it since I'm getting married first. Besides, Jessica can always find something else to wear to her City Hall ceremony. After Emma left, I called Grandma Rose, the one person in our family who'd always been on my side. At 82, Grandma had lived through enough family drama to recognize manipulation when she saw it. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice tired but gentle, "I tried to tell your parents that dress belongs to you. I've been saving it for you since you were a little girl. But they're not listening to me anymore. Emma came here yesterday with your mother, and they took it while I was napping." "Grandma, that's stealing." "I know, honey. But what can an old woman do against the two of them? Your mother said if I made trouble, they'd stop bringing me my groceries and medication." Derek took the phone from my shaking hands. "Mrs. Rose, this is Derek. Is there anything we can do legally?" "I'm afraid not, son. I gave the dress to Linda years ago with the understanding it would go to Jessica when she got married. But legally, it belongs to your mother now." That evening, Derek's family came over for dinner. His parents, Tom and Carol, had been watching this whole situation unfold with growing concern. His sister Megan, who'd just finished her first year of law school, was particularly outraged. "This is insane," Megan said, pacing our small kitchen. "They can't just take your wedding fund and give it to someone else." Carol, a soft-spoken woman who rarely got angry, looked furious. "Derek, honey, Tom and I want to help pay for the wedding. We know it won't be $40,000, but we've got some savings put aside." Before Derek could respond, my phone rang. It was Dad, and his voice was ice cold. "Jessica, I hear Derek's family is offering to pay for your wedding." "Dad, they're just trying to help because nothing. If you accept charity from those people, you're no longer welcome in this family. We have our pride, Jessica. The Morgans don't accept handouts." The hypocrisy was staggering. They'd stolen my wedding fund to pay for Emma's vacation, but Derek's family offering genuine help was somehow shameful? "Dad, it's not charity. They love Derek, and they want to see him happy." "I don't want to hear it. You turn down their money, or you don't come home again." After he hung up, Derek's family sat in stunned silence. Finally, Tom spoke up. "Jessica, sweetheart, you're going to be our daughter soon. We take care of our own, no matter what your father says." That night, I discovered Emma had been busier than just stealing my dress and venue. My cousin Marcus called, apologizing profusely. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Emma was lying about you. She told everyone at the family barbecue that you've been spoiled your whole life and that you threw a tantrum when your parents couldn't afford to pay for your wedding. She said you've been demanding money from Derek's family and making their lives miserable." My stomach dropped. "Marcus, none of that is true." "I know that now." Aunt Margaret started asking questions, and the whole story fell apart. "But Emma had most of the family convinced you were being a bridezilla who expected everyone else to pay for your fairy tale wedding." Aunt Margaret, Dad's sister, had always been the family truth-teller. If anyone could see through Emma's manipulation, it would be her. But how much damage had already been done to my reputation among our extended family? The next day, Derek came home from work early, his face grim. "Jessica, we need to talk." My heart sank. "What happened?" "Tyler's family owns the auto shop where I work. Apparently, Tyler mentioned to his dad that his girlfriend's sister is causing problems for their relationship. My boss called me in today and said there have been complaints about my work performance and attitude. But that's insane. You've worked there for 4 years without a single complaint." "I know. But Tyler's family has a lot of influence in this town. My boss suggested maybe I should look for work elsewhere." As I watched the man I loved deal with the consequences of my family's betrayal, I realized this was bigger than just a stolen wedding fund. Emma and my parents weren't just taking away our dream wedding. They were systematically trying to destroy our entire life together. The morning I thought things couldn't get worse, Emma called with her sweetest voice to deliver another devastating blow. "Jessica. You'll never guess what happened. Tyler and I set our wedding date, and it's going to be absolutely perfect." My hand tightened around the phone. "When?" "June 15th. I know that was your date originally, but since you're not having a big wedding anymore, we figured why waste such a beautiful summer date? Tyler's family has already started planning, and his mother thinks a June wedding will be simply divine. June 15th. The date Derek and I had chosen because it was the anniversary of our first date. The date we'd been planning around for 8 months. The date that was supposed to be the beginning of our new life together. Derek was getting ready for work, but he stopped when he saw my face. I mouthed Emma and pointed at the phone. His expression darkened. "Emma," I managed to say, "that's our wedding date." "Was your wedding date, silly? But you're not using it anymore, so I thought I'd save it from going to waste." "Waste not, want not, right?" "Oh, and Jessica? I was thinking you could be my maid of honor. Wouldn't that be sweet? You could help me plan everything since you're so good at that stuff." I hung up without responding and immediately called the venue to see if our contract meant anything. The manager, Mrs. Patterson, sounded genuinely sympathetic but helpless. "Miss Morgan, I'm so sorry. Your parents called yesterday and explained there was a family emergency that required transferring the date to your sister. Since the account is in your father's name and he's the one who made the deposit, legally we have to honor his request." Derek took the phone from me. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Derek Williams, Jessica's fiancé. We also put money down for that date. Doesn't that count for anything?" "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Williams. Your deposit was added to an existing account held by Mr. Morgan. Without his permission, I can't make any changes." After Derek left for work, I decided to drive to my childhood home to confront my parents directly. Maybe if I could make them understand how much pain they were causing, they'd realize how wrong this all was. I found Mom in the kitchen, excitedly looking at wedding magazines with Emma. They were surrounded by fabric samples, flower photos, and catering menus. Everything I'd been dreaming about for months was spread across the table, but now it was all for Emma. "Mom, we need to talk." Linda looked up with forced brightness. "Oh, Jessica. Perfect timing. Emma and I were just looking at cake designs. What do you think of this one?" She held up a picture of an elaborate 5-tier cake decorated with sugar flowers and gold leaf. It was the exact design I'd shown her 3 months ago, the one I'd been saving pictures of since Derek and I got engaged. "That's the cake I picked for my wedding." Emma waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you have great taste. I knew I could count on you for inspiration. Tyler's mother is sparing no expense, so we can actually afford something this elaborate." The casual cruelty in her voice was like a slap. Mom just smiled and continued flipping through magazines as if I hadn't spoken. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "He's at work, sweetie. But before you start getting upset about anything, you should know we've made our decision. Emma's wedding is going to be beautiful, and we expect you to be supportive." "Supportive?" My voice cracked. "Mom, she stole my wedding fund, my venue, my date, and now my cake design. How am I supposed to be supportive?" Emma looked up from the magazine she was reading with mock surprise. "Stole? Jessica, that's such an ugly word. I simply needed help, and family helps family." "Right, Mom?" "That's right, sweetheart. Jessica, your attitude lately has been very concerning. Derek's family is clearly a bad influence on you." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah, my best friend since high school and my chosen maid of honor. "Hey girl, Emma invited me to lunch to talk about being in her wedding. She's being so sweet and really wants us to be friends. I think this could be good for your family relationships." My heart sank. Sarah had no idea she was walking into a trap. That evening, Derek came home from work looking exhausted and worried. "Jessica, something strange happened today. Josh called and said he can't be my best man anymore." Josh had been Derek's roommate in trade school and one of his closest friends. They'd been planning bachelor party ideas for months. "What did he say?" That's the weird part. He was really vague. Just said something came up and he couldn't commit to the responsibility. But when I pressed him, he got defensive and said maybe it was better if we took a break from hanging out for a while. A chill ran down my spine. Derek, I think Emma got to him. What do you mean? I told him about my visit with Mom and Emma, about the cake design and their complete dismissal of my feelings. Then I showed him Sarah's text. Derek sat down heavily on our couch. She's trying to isolate us. Take away our support system before she makes her next move. He was right, but I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. My credit card company was calling about unusual activity on my account. When I checked my statements online, my stomach dropped. Someone had charged over $3,000 to my credit card in the past 2 days. Luxury hotel stays, expensive dinners, shopping sprees and designer stores. All of it in Emma's name. I immediately called the credit card company to report the fraud, but the customer service representative had troubling news. Miss Morgan, these charges were made with a card that was reported as a replacement for a lost card. The replacement was sent to your listed address. But I never reported my card as lost. According to our records, you called 3 days ago and requested a replacement card be sent to your address because your original was stolen. The replacement was picked up by someone with proper identification. My hands shook as I realized what had happened. Emma had access to our mail. She'd been coming and going from my apartment with that spare key, and she'd clearly been through my personal information. Derek was furious when I told him. We're calling the police right now. But when we got to the police station, Officer Martinez delivered more bad news. Miss Morgan, this is definitely fraud, but it's going to be difficult to prove. The person who picked up the replacement card had identification with your name on it. Your credit card company is going to require proof that you didn't authorize these charges. How can I prove I didn't give my sister permission to steal my identity? Do you have any witnesses who can verify your whereabouts during the times these charges were made? Derek and I looked at each other helplessly. I'd been at work, but Emma could have easily gotten a fake ID made. She'd always been good at manipulating systems and people. As we left the police station, my phone rang. It was Grandmother Rose, and she sounded frightened. Jessica, honey, you need to stay away from the house for a while. Grandma, what's wrong? Emma came by this morning with some man I'd never seen before. They were asking me questions about you and Derek. Wanting to know about your relationship, if I thought Derek was good for you, if you'd been acting strangely lately. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions? The man said he was a private investigator hired by your parents to make sure Derek was suitable for marriage. But something about it didn't feel right, Jessica. Emma kept smiling in that way she does when she's up to something. Derek took the phone. Mrs. Rose, did they say anything else? The man asked if I'd ever seen Derek lose his temper or be violent. He wanted to know if Jessica had ever come to me with bruises or seemed afraid. I told them Derek was the sweetest boy I'd ever met, but they just wrote things down in their notebook anyway. After hanging up, Derek and I sat in his truck outside the police station, both of us struggling to process what was happening. She's trying to build a case against me, Derek said quietly. Making it look like I'm abusive or dangerous. But why? What does she gain from destroying our relationship? Derek's jaw clenched. Think about it, Jessica. As long as you're with me, you have support. You have someone fighting for you, someone who sees through their manipulation. If she can get rid of me, you'll be completely alone and vulnerable. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the wedding money or even the wedding itself. Emma was systematically trying to destroy every aspect of my life that didn't revolve around serving her needs. That night, as we tried to figure out our next move, Derek's phone rang. It was his sister Megan. Derek, I found something you need to see. I was doing research for a class project on identity theft, and I decided to look into Emma's background. You're not going to believe what I found. Megan arrived at our apartment an hour later with a laptop and a folder full of printed documents. What she'd discovered made my stomach turn. "Emma's been doing this for years," Megan said, spreading papers across our kitchen table. "I found records of identity theft complaints in 3 different states. She's been using different variations of her name, but it's definitely her. Look at this." She pointed to a police report from Arizona dated 2 years ago. A college roommate had reported thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges on her credit card, all traced back to Emma Michelle Morgan. "There's more," Megan continued. "I found social media accounts where she brags about manipulating her family to pay for things. Look at this post from 6 months ago." She showed me Emma's Instagram story that had expired months ago but was saved on a gossip forum. In it, Emma was lounging on a beach in Miami, caption reading, "When you convince your parents your anxiety needs treating with retail therapy. Sometimes you just have to work the system, you know?" Derek leaned over my shoulder, reading another post. "Here's one about you, Jessica. My sister thinks she's so perfect with her college degree and engagement ring. Can't wait to show her who really runs this family." The evidence was overwhelming, but it also explained why Emma had been so confident throughout this entire ordeal. She'd done this before, and she'd never faced consequences. "We need to take this to the police," I said. "Already tried," Megan replied grimly. "I called the detective handling your credit card case. He said the previous cases were never prosecuted because the victims either dropped charges or couldn't provide enough evidence to proceed." Before we could discuss next steps, Derek's phone rang. It was his boss, and Derek's expression grew darker as the conversation progressed. "Yes, sir. I understand. Tomorrow morning." He hung up and sat down heavily. "I've been suspended pending an investigation into my work performance." "What kind of investigation?" "Apparently, several customers have complained about my attitude and work quality. They want to review my recent projects to see if there are safety issues with repairs I've done." I felt sick. "Derek, you're the best mechanic at that shop. Everyone knows that. Tyler's family owns the shop, Jessica. They can manufacture any complaints they want." Megan was typing furiously on her laptop. "This is conspiracy and harassment. We need to document everything." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. "Miss Morgan? This is Detective Collins with the Fraud Division. I need to speak with you about some serious allegations that have been made." My heart hammered as Derek and Megan listened to my side of the conversation. "What kind of allegations?" "Miss Morgan, we've received reports that you've been threatening your sister and engaging in stalking behavior. Your sister filed a restraining order request this afternoon, claiming you've been harassing her about money and making threats against her fiancé." The room started spinning. "Detective, that's completely false. Emma stole my credit card and used it to make fraudulent purchases. Miss Morgan, I have the documentation from your sister's complaint right here. She claims you've been angry about your parents' decision to help her with medical expenses instead of your wedding, and that you've been making threatening phone calls and showing up at her residence uninvited. I went to my parents' house once to talk to my mother. Miss Morgan, I'm going to need you to come in for questioning tomorrow morning. And I strongly advise you to stay away from your sister and your parents until this matter is resolved." After I hung up, the 3 of us sat in stunned silence. Emma had flipped the entire script, making herself the victim and me the dangerous aggressor. Derek's family business faced the next attack. Tom called that evening, sounding defeated. "Son, we got a surprise inspection today from the county. They found violations I've never seen before. Paperwork that wasn't filed properly, safety protocols they claimed we weren't following. They're threatening to shut us down until we can prove compliance." Derek's family had run their auto repair business for 15 years without a single major violation. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. "Dad, this is Tyler's family. They're using their connections to destroy us." "I know, son. But fighting City Hall isn't easy when you don't have money or lawyers. That night, I couldn't sleep. Derek held me as I cried, both of us wondering how our lives had spiraled so completely out of control. We'd gone from planning our dream wedding to facing potential legal charges in less than 2 weeks. The next morning brought another devastating blow. I'd lost my job. My supervisor, Mrs. Chen, called me into her office looking uncomfortable and apologetic. "Jessica, I'm going to be direct with you because I respect you too much to beat around the bush. We received some concerning information about your personal situation." "What kind of information?" "Someone called claiming to be your sister. She said you've been under tremendous stress lately and that your behavior at home has been erratic and concerning. She mentioned you'd been talking about wanting to hurt yourself or others." My jaw dropped. "Mrs. Chen, none of that is true. Emma is lying." "Jessica, I want to believe you, but we also had someone from your family call claiming you'd been stealing money from relatives to pay for your wedding. Our company policy requires us to investigate any allegations of theft or instability among employees who handle financial records. Even though I worked in marketing and never touched financial records, my company was too concerned about liability to keep me on while these allegations were being investigated." Derek picked me up from the office, and we drove home in silence. When we got to our apartment building, we discovered the next phase of Emma's plan. Our landlord, Mr. Russo, was waiting for us in the parking lot. "Jessica, Derek, I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to find somewhere else to live." "What? Why?" Derek demanded. "I got calls from several neighbors complaining about noise, arguing, possible domestic disturbances. Then today, someone from your family called saying they were concerned about your mental state and wondering if Derek might be dangerous." Derek's face went white. "Mr. Russo, there have been no domestic disturbances. We've been model tenants for 2 years. I know, and I hate doing this. But my insurance company says I'm liable if something happens and I ignored warning signs. I'm giving you 30 days to find somewhere else." As we sat in our apartment that night, surrounded by wedding magazines and plans that now seemed like relics from another life, Derek took my hands in his. "Jessica, I need you to know that no matter what happens, I'm not giving up on us. Emma can take our money, our jobs, our apartment, but she can't take what we have together." But even as he said it, I could see the strain this was putting on him. Dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, the weight of watching everything he'd worked for crumble because of my family's vendetta. "Derek, maybe you should walk away. This is my family's mess, not yours." He cupped my face in his hands. "Jessica Morgan, you are my family now. Whatever happens, we face it together." That night, I made a decision. If Emma wanted a war, she was going to get one. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. The 30-day eviction notice felt like a countdown to our complete destruction. Derek and I had been forced to move into his parents' basement, cramming our entire life into a small storage area that smelled of laundry detergent and old cardboard. The humiliation was crushing, but Tom and Carol Williams welcomed me like a daughter, never once making me feel like a burden despite the chaos my family had brought into their lives. Derek's suspension had become a termination after the county inspection found violations that mysteriously appeared in their system overnight. Safety violations that had been corrected years ago suddenly showed as unresolved. Permits that had been properly filed were missing from county records. Tyler's family had connections everywhere, and they were using every single one to destroy the Williams family business. The morning Derek's father got the official shutdown notice, I watched a man who'd never missed a day of work in 30 years break down crying at his kitchen table. Carol held his shaking hands while Derek stared at the wall, jaw clenched in helpless rage. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling pathetically inadequate. "This is all my fault." Tom looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Jessica, honey, this isn't your fault. This is what bullies do when good people stand up to them. We knew the risks when we decided to help you fight. But knowing it wasn't my fault didn't make watching Derek's family suffer any easier." These people had welcomed me, offered to pay for my wedding, and now they were losing everything because they dared to show me kindness. The police investigation into my alleged harassment of Emma had expanded. Detective Collins called me in for a second round of questioning, this time with more specific accusations. Miss Morgan, your sister has provided phone records showing multiple calls from your number to hers in the middle of the night. She also has recordings of voicemails where you allegedly threatened to make her pay for ruining your wedding. I stared at him in disbelief. Detective, I never called Emma in the middle of the night. And I certainly never threatened her. She also has witness statements from family members saying you've been acting erratically and making concerning statements about revenge. What family members? He consulted his notes. Your cousin Tommy Morgan provided a statement saying you approached him asking if he knew anyone who could teach Emma a lesson. Your mother provided a statement saying you've been calling her at all hours, screaming about how you're going to destroy Emma's wedding. Tommy. The cousin I'd helped through rehab 2 years ago, lending him money when no one else would, driving him to meetings when he didn't have a car. Emma had gotten to him too. The worst part was that I couldn't prove any of it was false. Emma was smart enough to use my real phone number, probably through some app that could spoof caller ID. She knew exactly what to say to make her lies sound believable. Derek hired a lawyer with money we didn't have, but even she looked concerned after reviewing the case. Miss Morgan, your sister has built a very convincing narrative. She's painted you as someone who's become unhinged due to jealousy and financial stress. The fact that you've lost your job and housing supports her claim that you're unstable. But none of it is true. I believe you, but proving it in court will be challenging. Your sister has multiple witnesses and documented evidence. We have your word and character references. That's when Derek faced his own legal troubles. He was arrested on charges of assault after Tyler filed a police report claiming Derek had threatened him at a gas station. Derek had been grocery shopping with his mother when the alleged incident occurred, but Tyler had security footage that seemed to show Derek grabbing him aggressively. I watched the footage in the police station, my heart sinking. It definitely looked like Derek, same height, same build, same jacket he'd worn that day. But something about the angles seemed wrong, the movements too jerky. It's been doctored, I told Detective Martinez. That's not how Derek moves. Miss Morgan, I understand you want to support your fiancé, but this footage came directly from the gas station's security system. Are you suggesting the business is involved in some conspiracy? Derek spent the night in jail before Tom could scrape together bail money. When he came home the next morning, I barely recognized the broken man who walked through the door. Jessica, he said quietly, sitting on the basement steps where we'd been sleeping, maybe you need to consider that we're not going to win this. What do you mean? I mean, maybe Emma's right. Maybe we should just accept that we can't have the wedding we wanted and move on with our lives. I stared at the man who'd promised to fight for us no matter what, and I realized that Emma had finally found his breaking point. Derek, you don't mean that. I've lost my job, my family's business is shut down, I've got criminal charges hanging over my head, and we're living in my parents' basement like teenagers. Maybe it's time to admit we've been beaten. That night, I lay awake listening to Derek's restless sleep, understanding that I was about to lose the most important thing in my life. Emma hadn't just stolen my wedding fund. She'd stolen my fiancé's hope. The next day brought the final blow. Grandmother Rose suffered a heart attack. I got the call from Mom while Derek was at his lawyer's office trying to prepare for his assault charges. Jessica, Grandma's in the hospital. The doctors say it was brought on by stress. I drove to the hospital with Derek's sister Megan, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to Grandmother Rose's room, I found Emma sitting beside the bed holding her hand, playing the devoted granddaughter. Oh, Jessica, Emma said loudly enough for the nurses to hear, I'm so glad you're here. Grandma's been asking for you. She's been so worried about your situation. Grandmother Rose looked at me with tired eyes. Jessica, sweetheart, come here. I approached the bed, but Emma didn't move from her chair. Grandma, how are you feeling? I've been better, honey. But I need to tell you something. She glanced at Emma, then back at me. I'm worried about you. All this fighting and stress isn't good for anyone. I realized what was happening. Emma was coaching her, using her medical condition to manipulate even our dying grandmother. Grandma, the fighting isn't my fault. Emma's eyes filled with crocodile tears. Jessica, please don't upset her. The doctor said stress could cause another attack. As I left the hospital that day, I understood that Emma had finally won completely. She'd turned my entire family against me, destroyed Derek's life and his family's livelihood, and now she was using our grandmother's heart attack as emotional blackmail to force my surrender. That night, Derek and I sat in the basement discussing the possibility of calling off our engagement entirely. Not just postponing the wedding, but ending our relationship to stop the destruction Emma was causing to everyone around us. Maybe if you're not with me, Emma will stop going after my family, Derek said, his voice hollow. I looked at the man I loved more than life itself and realized that Emma hadn't just stolen my wedding fund. She'd successfully destroyed everything I cared about, piece by piece, until surrender seemed like the only option left. But as I was about to agree that maybe we should give up, Derek's phone rang. It was his sister Megan, and her voice was excited in a way I hadn't heard in weeks. Derek, get Jessica and meet me at my apartment right now. I found something Emma didn't expect anyone to find. The announcement that Derek and Brianna's wedding had been moved up to Christmas Eve came through a beautifully designed digital invitation that arrived in my email like a mockery of everything I'd lost. The original spring date had been abandoned for what Derek publicly described as a romantic desire to start their married life during the most magical time of year, but I knew the real reason was to prevent me from having enough time to expose his plans before he disappeared with Brianna's inheritance. The accelerated timeline threw my family into a frenzy of activity that effectively eliminated any possibility of quiet reflection or serious conversation about Derek's character. Every day brought new decisions about flowers, venues, catering, and entertainment, with Derek positioning himself as the devoted fiancé who wanted everything to be perfect for his beloved Brianna. The chaos of wedding planning became another layer of protection for Derek, ensuring that anyone who tried to raise concerns would be seen as selfishly disrupting the couple's happiness during their most important moment. My exclusion from these activities was both painful and strategically important for Derek's manipulation campaign. Family members who might have questioned his version of events about my behavior were presented with constant evidence of my absence and apparent indifference to Brianna's happiness. Derek would mention sadly that he wished I could be there to share in Brianna's joy, expressing hope that someday I would overcome whatever personal issues were preventing me from supporting my sister's marriage. The psychological manipulation reached new levels of cruelty when I began receiving what appeared to be wedding invitations addressed to me, only to have Derek claim they were mistakes when family members mentioned seeing them. He would apologize profusely for the clerical errors, explaining that the wedding planner's assistant must have included me on the mailing lists by accident. These phantom invitations served the dual purpose of making me hope for reconciliation while providing Derek with opportunities to reinforce his narrative about my exclusion being necessary for everyone's safety and peace of mind. Meanwhile, my investigation with Sarah had uncovered the financial component of Derek's accelerated timeline, which was far more urgent than simple impatience to marry Brianna. Through careful analysis of Derek's previous patterns and Sarah's insider knowledge of his methods, we discovered that Derek had been systematically accessing Brianna's financial accounts for months, using their engagement as justification for combining their resources in preparation for marriage. The scope of Derek's theft was staggering. Brianna's trust fund, which had been established by our grandparents and was supposed to provide her with financial security for life, had been slowly drained through a series of transfers disguised as wedding expenses, investment opportunities, and joint financial planning. Derek had convinced Brianna that moving their money into shared accounts would simplify their post-marriage financial management, while actually transferring control of her assets to accounts he could access independently. But Derek's true masterpiece was his manipulation of family business relationships to extend his theft beyond just Brianna's personal assets. Using his engagement to our family as credentials, Derek had approached several of my father's wealthy clients with investment opportunities in his family's construction business. These investments, which totaled millions of dollars, were structured as legitimate business partnerships with impressive projected returns and solid legal documentation. The problem was that these construction projects existed only on paper, supported by forged permits, fake contractor agreements, and elaborate presentations that showcased Derek's family's supposed expertise and track record. The investors' money was being funneled through the same network of shell companies and offshore accounts that Derek had used to launder previous victims' assets, making it nearly impossible to trace once it disappeared into his system. My attempts to warn potential victims were blocked by Derek's preemptive character assassination campaign. When I tried to contact my father's clients directly, I discovered that Derek had already reached out to them with expressions of concern about my mental state and my pattern of making false accusations against him. Any warnings I tried to deliver were dismissed as further evidence of my obsession with Derek and my jealousy of Brianna's success. The isolation Derek had orchestrated around me became complete when I was arrested on charges of criminal harassment and stalking. The arrest warrant was based on a carefully constructed case that included fabricated evidence, manipulated witness statements, and Derek's own testimony about my escalating pattern of threatening behavior. The charges were serious enough to result in immediate incarceration, preventing me from interfering with Derek's wedding preparations during the most critical weeks. The evidence against me was sophisticated and comprehensive, including fake text messages, doctored photographs showing me near Derek's workplace and home, and witness statements from people who'd been convinced they'd seen me engaging in stalking behavior. Derek had even arranged for me to be photographed in locations where he frequently went, timing his appearances to coincide with my presence and creating the appearance of deliberate surveillance. My arrest made headlines in the local society pages, with coverage that painted me as an obsessed woman whose jealousy had driven her to criminal behavior against her sister's fiancé. The articles quoted anonymous family sources expressing concern about my mental health and relief that Derek had finally sought legal protection from my harassment. My mugshot appeared alongside photos of Derek and Brianna looking happy and relieved, creating a visual narrative that reinforced everything Derek had been saying about my character. The legal proceedings were designed to keep me silenced and discredited throughout the final weeks of wedding planning. My bail conditions included requirements to stay away from all family members, avoid any locations where Derek might be present, and refrain from any attempts to contact family friends or business associates. Violating these conditions would result in immediate rearrest and additional charges, effectively preventing me from making any further attempts to expose Derek's plans. But Derek's confidence in his legal strategy created an opportunity one hadn't expected. The arrest record and court proceedings provided a paper trail of his accusations and supposed evidence, giving Sarah and me concrete examples of Derek's current criminal activity that we could analyze and potentially debunk. His elaborate fabrications were impressive, but they were also vulnerable to detailed scrutiny by people who understood his methods and motivations. The false evidence Derek had created to support his harassment charges contained subtle inconsistencies and technical impossibilities that could be exposed by expert analysis. The timestamps on supposedly threatening text messages didn't align with phone records, the metadata on digital photographs showed signs of manipulation, and several witness statements contained details that contradicted publicly available information about my whereabouts and activities. More importantly, Derek's willingness to involve law enforcement and create false evidence demonstrated the escalation of his criminal activity beyond simple financial fraud. He was now committing serious felonies to protect his operation, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited if Sarah and I could find the right law enforcement contacts and legal resources to properly investigate his activities. The irony was that Derek's success in isolating and discrediting me had also freed me from any remaining family obligations or social constraints. With nothing left to lose and no reputation to protect, I could focus entirely on gathering evidence and building the case that would expose Derek's crimes and save my sister from the destruction that had befallen Sarah and Derek's other victims. My arrest had been Derek's biggest mistake, because it connected me with a legal aid attorney named Marcus Rivera who specialized in domestic abuse cases and had extensive experience with financial predators who targeted vulnerable women. Marcus immediately recognized the patterns in Derek's behavior and the sophisticated nature of his character assassination campaign, having seen similar tactics used by other criminals who specialized in exploiting intimate relationships for financial gain. Marcus's involvement transformed my situation from a desperate solo investigation into a legitimate legal strategy supported by professional resources and expertise. He connected me with Detective Lisa Chen, a financial crime specialist who'd been tracking similar cases across multiple jurisdictions and was very interested in the evidence Sarah and I had compiled about Derek's operation. Detective Chen had been building a case against Derek's family business for suspected money laundering, but hadn't been able to establish the personal connections that would give her access to their financial records. The breakthrough came when Marcus arranged for a forensic examination of the evidence Derek had presented to support his harassment charges against me. The analysis revealed multiple layers of digital manipulation and fabrication that constituted serious criminal fraud in their own right. The fake text messages contained metadata that proved they'd been created using professional software. The witness statements included details that contradicted surveillance camera footage from the locations in question, and the timeline of supposed stalking incidents was impossible given documented evidence of my whereabouts. But the most damaging discovery was Derek's mistake in creating the false evidence. He'd used his own personal devices and internet connections to fabricate several pieces of the case against me. The digital forensics expert was able to trace the creation of fake text message screenshots and manipulated photographs directly back to Derek's home computer and phone, providing indisputable proof that he'd committed perjury and evidence tampering in a criminal case. This evidence gave us the leverage we needed to approach Detective Chen with a comprehensive case against Derek that extended far beyond my personal situation. The Financial Crimes Unit was authorized to begin a formal investigation into Derek's business practices, his family's construction company, and the network of offshore accounts and shell companies that Sarah had identified. The criminal charges related to fabricating evidence against me provided probable cause for search warrants that would give investigators access to Derek's personal and business records. Meanwhile, an unexpected ally emerged from within my own family when my mother's best friend Margaret contacted me through Marcus's office. Margaret had been suspicious of Derek from the beginning, but had stayed quiet out of respect for my father's judgment and Brianna's happiness. However, Derek's recent attempts to access what he believed was my inheritance had triggered alarm bells that prompted Margaret to reach out. As the executor of my mother's estate, Margaret had been approached by Derek with a proposal to help manage my inheritance given my apparent mental health issues and recent legal troubles. Derek had presented himself as a concerned family member who wanted to ensure that my mother's legacy was protected from my poor judgment and potentially self-destructive behavior. He'd even provided legal documentation supporting his authority to make financial decisions on my behalf during my period of incompetency. Margaret's refusal to cooperate with Derek's scheme had prompted him to escalate his approach, threatening to have her removed as executor based on her failure to protect the estate from a clearly unstable beneficiary. The legal pressure Derek applied to Margaret included formal complaints to the probate court and accusations that she was enabling my dangerous behavior by maintaining my access to inheritance funds. But Margaret's decades of experience in financial management and estate planning made her immediately suspicious of Derek's motivations and methods. She'd quietly conducted her own investigation into Derek's background and had discovered several inconsistencies in his family's business registration and financial reporting that suggested serious legal violations. Her evidence, combined with Sarah's documentation and Detective Chen's financial crimes investigation, created a comprehensive picture of Derek's criminal enterprise. The plan that emerged from these collaborations was both simple and brilliant. We would allow Derek to continue with his wedding preparations while gathering additional evidence of his financial crimes, then execute a coordinated legal action that would expose his activities just before he could complete his theft and disappear. The timing was critical, because Derek's pattern with previous victims showed that he typically vanished with stolen assets immediately after completing his financial objectives. Detective Chen's investigation had revealed that Derek was planning to transfer the majority of stolen funds to offshore accounts during the week between Christmas and New Year's, using the holiday period and wedding celebration as cover for moving large amounts of money without attracting attention. Bank records showed that he'd already begun the process of liquidating investments and consolidating assets in preparation for the final transfer. But Derek's confidence in his own success had made him careless about security around his closest associates, including his best friend Lucas Morrison, who'd been peripherally involved in some of Derek's business activities without fully understanding their criminal nature. Lucas had grown increasingly uncomfortable with some of the things he'd witnessed and overheard, particularly Derek's callous discussions about Brianna and his boasting about manipulating the entire family. Marcus's investigative team had approached Lucas carefully, offering him immunity from prosecution in exchange for cooperation in exposing Derek's crimes. Lucas's position as Derek's confidant and best man gave him access to information and conversations that would be invaluable in building a comprehensive criminal case. More importantly, Lucas had begun secretly recording conversations with Derek, creating indisputable evidence of Derek's intentions and methods. The recordings Lucas provided were devastating to Derek's carefully constructed image. In private conversations, Derek laughed about Brianna's naivety and expressed amazement at how easily he'd manipulated the entire family into trusting him. He boasted about his ability to make me appear crazy and described his plans for disappearing with Brianna's money immediately after the wedding ceremony, leaving her financially devastated and too ashamed to pursue criminal charges. But the most shocking revelation in Lucas's recordings was Derek's admission that he'd never intended to actually marry Brianna. The wedding ceremony was simply the final phase of his theft operation, designed to provide legal cover for the asset transfers and to ensure that Brianna would be too emotionally devastated to think clearly about pursuing justice. Derek planned to disappear during the honeymoon, leaving behind forged divorce papers and a trail of financial transactions that would be nearly impossible to unravel. Armed with this evidence and supported by professional law enforcement resources, we developed a plan to confront Derek publicly at the family's Thanksgiving dinner, which he'd moved to his family's estate as another demonstration of his growing control over family traditions and gatherings. The confrontation would be carefully orchestrated to maximize the impact of the evidence while ensuring that Derek couldn't escape or destroy additional evidence before being arrested. The plan required precise timing and coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies, since Derek's crimes spanned several jurisdictions and involved both state and federal violations. Detective Chen worked with FBI financial crimes specialists to ensure that Derek's offshore accounts could be frozen simultaneously with his arrest, preventing him from accessing stolen funds even if he managed to delay prosecution through legal maneuvering. But the most important element of our strategy was ensuring that Brianna and my family would be present to hear Derek's own words describing his manipulation and theft. The psychological impact of hearing Derek's true feelings about them, in his own voice, would be essential for breaking through the layers of manipulation and emotional control he'd established over months of careful grooming. The knock on my apartment door came at 8 o'clock on Thanksgiving evening, just as I was trying to distract myself from the family dinner I'd been excluded from by watching old movies and eating takeout Chinese food. I expected to find my landlord or perhaps a delivery driver, but instead found Lucas Morrison standing in my hallway, his face pale and his hands shaking as he clutched a small digital recording device. Lucas looked like a man who'd seen a ghost, or perhaps like someone who'd finally realized he'd been living with a monster. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone whose entire understanding of reality had been shattered. He introduced himself unnecessarily, since I knew exactly who he was, and asked if he could come inside to tell me something that I needed to hear about Derek. The story Lucas told over the next hour changed everything I thought I knew about Derek's manipulation and the scope of his criminal plans. As Derek's best friend since college and his chosen best man, Lucas had been privileged to witness Derek's private moments and unguarded conversations, gradually realizing that the charming, successful man everyone admired was actually a calculating predator who viewed human relationships as business opportunities to be exploited. The recording Lucas played for me was from earlier that day, when Derek had invited him to a private celebration at the Ashford family estate before the official family dinner. Derek had been drinking and feeling victorious about the success of his campaign against me and his complete control over the family dynamics. In his intoxicated state, Derek had dropped all pretense and revealed the true scope of his plans for Brianna and my family. Derek's voice on the recording was casual and conversational, as if he were discussing a successful business deal rather than the systematic destruction of people who'd welcomed him into their lives. He laughed about how easy it had been to turn the family against me, describing my father as a pompous idiot who cared more about appearances than his own daughter's welfare. He mocked Brianna's intelligence, calling her the perfect mark because she was desperate for validation and completely trusting of anyone who made her feel special. But the most chilling part of Derek's confession was his detailed description of what he planned to do after the wedding ceremony. He had no intention of actually staying married to Brianna or maintaining any relationship with my family once he'd completed his financial objectives. The honeymoon trip to Europe was designed as cover for his disappearance, with forged divorce papers and fabricated evidence of Brianna's mental breakdown prepared to explain his abandonment of the marriage. Derek boasted about the sophistication of his exit strategy, which included new identity documents, untraceable financial accounts, and connections in countries without extradition treaties with the United States. He'd done this before with previous victims, he explained, and had perfected the art of disappearing without leaving any actionable evidence of his crimes. The families he'd destroyed were left too ashamed and financially devastated to pursue justice, while he moved on to identify new targets and repeat the process. The recording revealed that Derek's theft from Brianna and my family was far more extensive than even our investigation had uncovered. Beyond Brianna's trust fund and the fake investments sold to my father's clients, Derek had been systematically stealing from family business accounts, charity organizations, and even the wedding fund that relatives had contributed to help pay for the celebration. The total amount of his theft was approaching $5 million, making this his most successful operation to date. Lucas's reason for finally coming forward was Derek's casual mention of his backup plan for dealing with me if I continued to interfere with his activities. Derek had decided that having me committed to a psychiatric facility would be more effective than simply discrediting me, and he'd already begun laying the groundwork for having me declared mentally incompetent and dangerous. The legal framework Derek was creating would give him control over my inheritance and eliminate me as a threat to his future operations. But what finally pushed Lucas to betray his best friend was Derek's description of how he planned to handle Brianna's inevitable emotional breakdown when she discovered his theft and abandonment. Derek had researched psychiatric facilities where traumatized wealthy women could be quietly committed by concerned family members, explaining that Brianna's suicide attempt after discovering her husband's disappearance would provide perfect justification for long-term institutionalization that would prevent her from ever testifying against him. Lucas's horror at Derek's complete lack of empathy for the people he was destroying had finally overcome his loyalty to their friendship. He realized that Derek viewed him as just another tool to be used and discarded, and that his own knowledge of Derek's crimes made him a potential liability that would eventually need to be eliminated. The recording he'd made was his insurance policy, but he'd decided that he couldn't live with himself if he stayed silent while Derek destroyed Brianna's life and drove me to suicide or institutionalization. The plan Lucas and I developed was necessarily simple, because we had less than 2 hours before Derek's carefully orchestrated family dinner would begin at the Ashford estate. Detective Chen and her team were already in position around the property, waiting for our signal to move in and arrest Derek once his confession had been heard by the family members he'd been manipulating. The timing was critical, because Derek's financial transfers were scheduled to begin the following morning, making this our last opportunity to prevent him from disappearing with stolen assets. Lucas's role was to get me inside the estate and into position to play Derek's confession during dinner, when the entire family would be gathered in one place and Derek would be relaxed and confident about his control over the situation. The plan was risky, because Derek had specifically excluded me from the gathering and had legal grounds to have me arrested for trespassing and violating the restraining order. But Lucas had thought of a solution that would protect us legally while ensuring maximum impact for Derek's confession. As the best man and honored guest, Lucas could invite anyone he chose to attend the dinner, and his invitation would override Derek's exclusion of me from the family gathering. More importantly, Lucas planned to record Derek's reaction to my appearance and the playing of his confession, providing additional evidence of his guilt and consciousness of wrongdoing. The drive to the Ashford estate was the longest 30 minutes of my life, as Lucas and I rehearsed our plan and prepared for every possible contingency. Derek's reaction to seeing me would be immediate and dramatic, but we needed him to incriminate himself further before Detective Chen's team moved in to make the arrest. The recording device was programmed to begin playing Derek's confession automatically when Lucas activated it, ensuring that technical difficulties couldn't prevent the family from hearing the truth about the man they'd welcomed into their lives. As we approached the estate's imposing gates, I realized that this moment represented either the complete vindication of everything I'd sacrificed to expose Derek's crimes, or the final destruction of my relationship with my family and my credibility in any future legal proceedings. Derek's manipulation had been so comprehensive and successful that some family members might still refuse to believe the evidence even when confronted with his own recorded confession. But regardless of the outcome, I knew that I'd finally have the opportunity to fulfill my responsibility as Brianna's sister and my mother's daughter. The truth about Derek's intentions would be revealed, and my family would have to confront the reality of what they'd chosen to believe about me and the monster they'd welcomed into their lives.